So I'm here to demo my mapping activity. And the purpose of this activity is to notice a bunch of stuff. It's to notice how our black and white thinking, our extremes of thinking often doesn't serve us. It's useful for exploring places like where a certain personality trait or quality is a superpower and where it turns into kryptonite. And at the end, one of the goals is to have really solid info about what it looks like when you're in superpower mode, what it looks like when you're in kryptonite mode, and how to move back toward superpower. So I like to start this by just drawing a little arc and putting a 0% at one side and a 100% at the other side. And the purpose of the numbers is just to make it easier to pinpoint places. There's nothing magical about them. We're certainly not looking for correct numbers. Okay. So let's say that that what we're trying to explore here is let's say anxiety. But there are a lot of things that we can explore with this. In fact, I've find tons and tons of things. We can explore our values with this, like I don't know, responsibility or control, even caring, right? Even compassion, right? There are just endless opportunities for noticing the nuances within any given trait or value, and to get some clarity in where the nuance really works for us and where it becomes problematic. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to notice these extremes. With anxiety, what might you notice if you had zero anxiety? Now, in my experience, people who have been experiencing a lot of anxiety desperately want zero anxiety, and how could we not? And so we might notice things like, oh, and I might feel calm. So I'm going to jot notes that is video demo for calm. I might feel calm, right? I might feel at ease. I guess that's a synonym there. Forgive me. My body might feel at ease. Let's go into the body sensation. So, like, what your mind and emotions feel like. What might your body feel like? What might your life look like? Oh, well, I might not be as proactive, right? I might not feel the urgency to get things done, so I might procrastinate more, or let things get by me. I might socialize less because I don't feel that need to like get out there and make sure I'm nurturing relationships. Okay, so noticing all of that. And then we're going to do the same thing with 100%. What would your mind and emotions be like at 100%? What would your body be like? You know, how might that function in your life? Gosh, I'd be overwhelmed, I'd be frozen, I'd be in a fetal position, right? So good. Now we've got these bookends, and what we typically find is that 95% of the time, we don't want to be at either extreme, right? At 95% of the time, anything we look at, we discover that an extreme can become a problem. Now we're going to look at where you tend to hang out, right? Often there's a range, and that's fine. You can represent a range with a couple of little notes. You might say, oh, you know, gosh, these days I'm hanging out at like 75 to 85%. Okay. Again, there's no truth in numbers. What we're really just trying to do is find themes and information. So don't get too hung up on that part. Just pick a number. You might have picked an average and just said, well, like an average, like I guess I hang out about 80%. Okay, 80%. Cool. All right, so we're going to do the exact same stuff. All right, how do you know that you're at 80%? What's that like in your mind and your emotions? What's that like in your body? What happens in your life? Right? And maybe there's a lot of information here because you've been living it. Okay. Again, we can use this with lots of other stuff. Okay. You tend to hang out at 75 to 80% responsibility. What's that like? Right? Does that feel like pressure? Does that feel exciting? Does it feel like caring for people? Does it feel like whatever? Again, no right or wrong answers. We're just looking for information. Okay, so now we're going to look at where would you like to be, right? What would feel good? Well, we had thought it would be zero, but we've discovered actually that might be less productive than we would like to be. So how do we get the good stuff that's available from anxiety without all the discomfort that goes with having it really cranked up? How do we get the good stuff from responsibility without getting into the stuff that makes it so hard to continue to live that value? So maybe we decide like, actually like 45. 45 sounds pretty good. I could do 45. All right, switch colors. You could do that too if you want to. You get out your whole kit. And we're gonna do the same thing, okay? what are you imagining that 45 would be like in your mind and your emotions? Maybe you've experienced it before. Maybe you had that glorious, phase of your life when you really were a little bit lower and you know exactly what it would be like. Maybe not. Maybe it's a game of imagination. Maybe it's a game of thinking of your friend who looks really chill. It doesn't matter. Again, we're just gathering some thoughts that we can test later. Okay, so what would it be like in your mind and your emotions? What would that be like in your body? And what would that be like in your life? Okay, now we've got some more information. Now we know what we're looking for. And you keep an eye out for this in your life. How cool is that? All right. So then we're going to look for information that you have for how to move from here to here. Right? And there's some basic skills that often are relevant here. Things like mindfulness, right? Mindfulness tends to go everywhere. Maybe jot some notes about that. Maybe there's some really specific things like that are very you. When I go to the rock climbing gym, that really helps. When I speak with my spouse, when I pet my dog, when I make something, right? When I get into my creative mode, when I cook something, when I eat a really beautiful meal that I've prepared with intentionality, when I take a walk, whatever. Go ahead and get those down. And again, much like over here, they might be known things or they might be experiments. Like, I think it would be nice to paint, but I don't know. Okay, let's give it a try. All right. One more step, one more color. We're going to go orange. The last step, the last color, is to get curious about how do you know you're heading in this direction? Okay. Now, often what I find is that while we're practicing these skills, we don't even know we're heading in that direction until we hit this wall. So we're in the thick of all of this, right? And that's cool. It's not fun, but it's cool. And what I mean by that is that rerouting our neural pathways, which is what we're creating a map to do here, takes time. It's like taking a great big river that's been flowing in the same banks for centuries and saying, we're actually going to move it this way. I'm going to add a little curve here. That water is going to go down the path of least resistance. Our behaviors and our thoughts and our emotions are going to go down the path of least resistance. And then when we start digging this, we get a little water going that way, and then it's going to come back over. And then we're going to get a little more digging this way, it's going to come back here, right? And then over time, we're going to get this to be a really well-established route. That doesn't mean that when a big rain comes, it's not going to go right back into that initial or original channel. That's okay. That's part of being human, right? We don't actually unwire neural pathways entirely usually, but we can really reinforce the pathways we mean to be using. Spoiler, self-compassion helps a lot along the way. Okay. So initially, we may not notice it until we're already deep in this zone. And again, we're going to bring in some self-compassion. That's okay. But perhaps you can notice some things that wind back. Like, actually, I noticed that right about here, I start snapping at my partner, right? That's something I've noticed. I can do that. Or maybe you go to your partner or your friend or whoever, a parent, somebody who knows you well, and you say, hey, what do you notice? What do you notice in me when I'm ramping up? So for example, years ago, Teresa told me that I start rubbing my hands together when I'm starting to get stressed. I had zero awareness of that. And now that she's pointed it out to me, I notice that I do that before I'm kind of cognitively aware, consciously aware that I'm stressed. And so that's become my first indicator. If I'm rubbing my hands together, if I'm starting to massage my hands, that's my cue to pause and go, okay, what's happening here? Like, is my anxiety or my stress cranking up? And what do I need to do to get ahead of it? So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the things that are as far back this way as possible so that you can implement these things as early as possible. Okay, so you see where we are? We know we've got our benchmarks. We know what the average feels like. We know where we're heading. We know what can help us, or at least what we're curious might help us move in the direction of where we mean to be. And we're going to be practicing noticing what moves us this way. All right. I look forward to hearing where you take this.